good to be here with you again. And we're talking about compassion and justice, right? So, beforehand, I always like to sit quietly with people so we can make the transition between running around all day and doing something different with our mind. So, just for a moment, sit up straight, have your hands in your lap, your feet flat on the floor, and just become aware of your breath. And let your breathing just be normal in a very relaxed way. And pay attention to it. If you get distracted, just notice the distraction and come back home to your breath. And in this way, the mind settles down. So we'll do this just for a couple of minutes. Let our minds relax. And then before we actually begin, let's generate a compassionate motivation. And with the mind seeing that all of us are in the same boat, wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. And yet, all of us have minds filled with ignorance, anger, clinging attachment, self-centeredness. So seeing that we're all imperfect living beings, even though we want happiness and not want suffering, let's have an attitude of acceptance for each other, an attitude of compassion, knowing that we're all doing what we can, doing our best, and yet we're all limited beings. On the other hand, we have amazing human potential that can go far beyond what we've ever imagined. And so seeing that everybody has that inner potential, has that inner beauty, that everybody's worthy of respect and kindness. Let's listen and share together this evening to increase our own good qualities so we can help others increase theirs, and so we can make a really positive contribution to society and to all living beings. So with a very broad, compassionate mind, then let's listen and share together this evening. Okay. So compassion and justice. I know I can give you the definition of compassion, and I know how to talk about compassion. Not that I have it, but I know how to talk about it. And justice, is a really, it's kind of a confusing notion for me. I've never heard any of my Tibetan teachers ever mention the word justice in a teaching, which is interesting, isn't it? Because in theistic religions, justice is a real big thing that comes very often in the teachings. So in the car down here, we looked up the definition of justice. I always find it interesting to look up definitions. Okay, so a few things. The quality of being fair and reasonable, or acting, the quality of acting in a fair and reasonable way. That sounds not too bad. Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. The administration of a law. Okay. Moral righteousness. The use of power as appointed by law, honor, or standard to support fair treatment and due reward. Okay, in religion, the idea of justice is linked with God's law, not mere human reasoning. There's some kind of law. And then I ask myself, what do I usually associate the word justice with? Yeah? So in your life, when you hear the word justice, somebody says, I want justice. What does it mean? Yeah? My connotations, I want justice means they hurt me, I want to cause them pain back. Does that have that connotation for you? Yeah, the whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth bit. Okay. So eye for an eye, you hit me in the eye, I can hit you in the eye, that's justice. As I think it was Gandhi said, in that case we will all be blind and we will all be eating Gerber's baby food forever. No teeth, no eyes. Okay. I associate justice very much with punishment. Yeah, do you? I see some heads nodding. I do work in prisons, and there the idea of justice is very much punishment. Yeah, we're going to punish these people. They did something, and now we will punish them. Supposedly, the reason for punishing somebody is to make them stop doing that action. Yeah. So, punishment's supposed to make them stop doing the action, and it's supposed to make the people who were harmed feel better. Yeah. Which means that you're a person who rejoices when other people suffer. What kind of person does that make you if you rejoice at other people's suffering? Just think about it. Okay? Then what about the other part? Punishment creates a change in behavior. So we all got punished as little kids, didn't we? How much did punishment change your behavior? Or how much did punishment change your attitude? Those are two different things, your behavior and your attitude. So punishment may change our behavior because we change it out of fear. But is fear a good motivation not to do something? Yeah. Do you want to walk around in fear your whole life, or do you want to cause other people to walk around in fear? I don't think fear is such a nice thing to feel, do you? You know, especially fear that you're going to get it. And then how many people react to punishment with defiance? Yeah, remember when you were a kid and as soon as mom and dad said don't do this, you went out and did it? It's like, don't tell me what to do. And defiance, nobody's going to boss me around. Okay, so does punishment really work to change behavior? And what about when we incarcerate people? Does incarceration change behavior? It changes behavior in the sense that people become institutionalized. And often they become, their critical thinking faculty declines because they have no opportunity to use it. They simply have to do what others say out of fear of, either getting beaten up by other inmates or getting thrown in the hole, what they call administration segregation, ad-seg, or solitary confinement, whatever you want to call it. The guys usually call it the hole. And getting thrown in the hole, which nobody likes, often leads people to mental illness. Yeah, great. And so that's why there's some movement now to stop solitary, because people crack under it. Now, what about the idea of justice making the victim feel better? Okay, so like I said, I work in different prison situations with people who write. They want to know about Buddhism and they want a book or they have questions or something like that. And so there was one guy I was writing to. He was on death row in Oklahoma. Okay, there's a few states that if you're going to get arrested in those states, really bad idea. Okay, don't get arrested in Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Illinois, Louisiana, and probably all the other ones too. But those are some of the worst ones. Okay. So he was on death row for a murder that he said he didn't do. And I talked to his federal attorney. He was indigent, and so he had a federal, an appointed attorney. And she came out to the Abbey to do an interview because she was making a clemency appeal, how they always do before death penalty cases. And we talked a long, long time about his case. And she was very doubtful that he really committed this crime. And she had a lot of evidence to the contrary, but of course the court said, sorry, it's too late, you can't present it now. Aside from the fact that he had a death sentence in an Oklahoma, from the Oklahoma prison system, although the crime was created on federal land, so it should have been tried in federal court. But never mind, that's too late to change that now. New evidence, doesn't matter. And so she explained to me, because the district attorneys so badly want to get a death sentence, because it makes them look big, it makes them look tough on crime. And so they actually use the victim or the victim's family for their own career advancement, in the sense that they tell the victim, you suffered, this person killed your loved one, or they tell the victim's family, this person killed your loved one. When they are executed, then justice is done, and you will feel better because justice is done. So they string along the victim's family all this time, telling them that justice is so important and how good they'll feel. And they do this, so that the victim's family testifies against the person and so on and so forth. And the victim's family can actually influence the sentence that somebody gets. And then this woman who was the attorney, she's done several death, capital cases. And she said that, because she's gone often to the execution, and as soon as the execution is over, then the prosecutors, everybody goes, okay, justice is done, and they completely drop the victim's family. Yeah, it's like, okay, the execution is over, you can leave the prison, all our publicity is over, we don't need you anymore, and you're supposed to feel good and bye. And that emotionally can be very brutal for the families, because it leaves, how do you feel better? People say, oh, I feel so much better. He got what he deserved. But I wonder, do they really feel better in their heart? When we rejoice at somebody else's death or somebody else's experience of pain, what does that do to our own self-esteem? What does that do to our own self-respect? And so I think some of the victims' families often feel, rather tortured and twisted inside afterwards. But this is supposed to be justice. Yeah, this is supposed to be justice. So I always call it the injustice system, not the justice system. Yeah, because I've been in contact with too many people who are either imprisoned unfairly, or even if they have done the crime, and many of them have, the way justice is meted out, meaning punishment, it does absolutely no good to benefit either the victim's family or the perpetrator. Yeah. In fact, often the perpetrators learn bigger and better ways to do illegal activities when they're in prison. Okay? So penitentiary was supposed to be for penance. Yeah, it was supposed to, so that you regretted your thing. But in actual fact, some of the guys come out of it more cynical, more defiant than they went in, because the system is focused very much on punishment. Yeah, not on rehabilitation, not on giving them skills and so on, so that they can come out and be good members of society. But it's very much the idea that, once you're a criminal, always a criminal. Yeah, so either lock you up forever and throw away the key, or if we let you out, we're not going to give you any skills, any chance to get a job or live a reasonable life. Okay, and that's really sad, because when you look at the situation of many of the people in prison, there's a disproportionate number of impoverished people who are in prison who need skills so that they can have a career and do a job. And instead of getting those skills in prison, instead of getting some rehab work mentally so that they can develop some self-esteem and self-confidence, actually the system makes them feel worse about themselves. And then after you serve your sentence, they give you $20 and your old clothes back, and you're supposed to start a life from that. Sometimes they give you a bus ticket too. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, you get $40 in a bus ticket. And with that, If you've been locked up for several years and you haven't had contact with your family, because the way the prison system is you know how right now we have unlimited calls on many of our phones, and even if it's you pay, just a few pennies for a call anywhere in the country. In the justice system, they have deals with the telephone companies where they sometimes charge $1 per minute per phone call. And these are often to poor families. And whereas it's shown that if an inmate has more contact with family and more support from friends and family outside, then recidivism rate is lower because these people have somewhere to go back to, people to encourage them, they belong to a family, to a group, that kind of thing helps them. The prison system makes it so difficult for them to have that kind of contact with family and friends because they can't afford it. So then you're released, so where do you go? Well, maybe you go back to your old neighborhood and then you're hanging out with all the people you used to hang out with, which are the group of people that you shouldn't be hanging out with now. But you're going back to your own neighborhood, so guess who's there? Okay? Or you wind up going downtown in some city to a homeless shelter or panhandling on the street, because you have no money to even stay a night somewhere. And if you're a sex offender, really forget it, because there are so many laws against where you can live that it's almost impossible to find a place to stay. Yeah, because you can't live within so many feet of a school or so many feet of a courthouse, or there's all these restrictions now, and you can't find a place to live. And even if you do find a place to live, you have to register, and then everybody in the neighborhood gets a notice saying your name living at this address is a sex offender. And every time you go for a job application and they ask if you have a criminal record or they do a background check, this comes up. You never get hired. Yeah? So it's very, very difficult. So what the point I'm getting at here is that our society thinks of justice as punishment. And by seeing justice in that way, we're not only making it harder for the people who have committed offenses or have been locked up, we're also we're making it more difficult for us in our neighborhoods and societies, because when these people come out, it's very difficult for them to find work and to be able to set up a life. Yeah? And so they go back to their old friends, they go back to drug dealing, because, you can make a buck dealing drugs and nobody will hire you. Yeah? And so, we aren't benefiting those people, and we aren't benefiting ourselves. The people who are living on the outside. It doesn't help anybody. And this whole movement for they have the privatization of prisons now. So now, the shareholders in these, who have stock in these prisons, they want more money. So they pressure the legal system to make more laws and pass stiffer punishments so that more people are incarcerated in those for-profit prisons, and then the shareholders get more money. That's real fair, isn't it? Yeah? So, private, and then the private prisons also, they cut a lot of the programs, and the budget cuts in general in the country are cutting, rehab programs and job training programs in prisons. Yeah. So what I find so interesting is that as a society, when there's a bill in your local area for raising taxes for schools, people don't want to pay more tax for schools, especially if your kids are grown. Yeah. When your kids are little, okay, I'll pay some taxes for school. But if your kids are grown, the mind says, why should I pay for somebody else's kids to go to school? That's not fair. I don't want to pay taxes for their kids to go to school. So then the kids have less education. They have fewer programs after school. So kids who don't have arts and crafts, athletics, after-school programs, they don't have a good education. What do they do in their spare time? Yeah, they get into trouble. Whose houses do they burglarize to get money for drugs? The people who voted against paying taxes for schools, because those people have grown-up kids and they live in nicer neighborhoods. Yeah? Yet, those very same people who will not pay more taxes for schools will definitely pay more taxes to build prisons. Yeah, and so then we have this random prison building such that our country, we're the land of the free, right? Land of the free, home of the brave. So that we have the highest percentage of incarcerated people according to our population than any other country. Yeah. We're the land of the free, but what do? We lock people up right, left, and center. Yeah. There's, 2.3 million Americans are locked up? It's ridiculous. And many of them for nonviolent crimes. Because after they did this 3 strikes law, yeah, so maybe your last crime was you shoplifted some toothpaste, but now they'll throw you in for a really long time because it was your 3rd one. So 3 strikes, you're out. So that's why I call it the injustice system. Okay, Brian Stevenson's book is fantastic. I really recommend you read it, because in it you will see over and over cases that he encountered where he saw, the blatant unfairness, of the system, and especially in Alabama, which brought us. Who's the guy Moore? What's his first name? The one who's going to run for Congress? Michael? No. Michael Moore is a good guy. Michael Moore is the one that makes the films, that expose this kind of stuff. He just won the... Roy Moore. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the one who at his what do you call it, a campaign thing, he took out a pistol and raised it in the air and shook it and vote for me. That's really convincing, isn't it? Yeah. Well, you better vote for me. I'm waving a pistol. But so Alabama, who brought you, who brought us George Wallace, right? Yeah. And now Roy Moore. Yeah, so that's the state that Brian Stevenson lives in. And, he just shows, the corruption is unbelievable in the justice system. Yeah. So why am I talking about all of this, Is it just to tell you horror stories or to warn you don't, pay your your traffic tickets? Because in Ferguson, Missouri, they'll lock you up if you don't pay your traffic tickets. Yeah, you heard about that after the whole Michael Brown thing. Then it came out that the way Ferguson raises money for its city functions is, and many cities do this by giving traffic tickets. But, and so it's a poor area, so people get pulled over, they get traffic tickets. If you can't pay your traffic ticket, and it's not only in Ferguson, it's in many places around the country, then they lock you up. So it becomes kind of like debtor's prison. You don't have enough to pay for your traffic ticket. They lock you up, which means you lose your job. So forget about ever paying your traffic ticket. And then, of course, if you're a parent, you're locked up and you've lost your job because you're locked up, how are you going to support your kids? How do you take care of your kids? So then your kids are on the street. Yeah? This is our country can do better than this. Okay? And what also, I feel like all I'm doing is complaining about the country, but maybe there's some things to complain about. But no, I'll try and, I'm not complaining. I'm trying to say what's happening, okay? So one thing that I find also amazing is this thing that's happening now where Trump has taken away birth control, free birth control for women on the health care plan, so that healthcare providers are no longer obliged to support that. So then you have women, and a large number of impoverished women, who have no access to birth control, who have babies that they clearly can't take care of, who need state aid. But the government won't give you the birth control to avoid having the baby. But once they want you to have the baby, they force you to have the baby. But once you have the baby, you can't get food stamps because they're cutting that program. You can't get health care for your child because they want to repeal and replace that. Your kid can't get an education because they're cutting taxes for the rich, and so the school systems will suffer. And so I find this very puzzling. You won't provide birth control, and you want the kid to be born, but once the kid is born, society will not help the kid. Yeah. So here's this kid. Why don't we feed the child? Why don't we educate the child? Why don't we give the child good birth control, a good health plan? And when the child grows up, why don't we give the child also birth control? We have too many people on this planet anyway. Yeah? So I find it so interesting, the way we human beings think, or maybe the way we don't think. Yeah, that leads to these policies in which we think it's a good policy, but we're actually harming society as a whole. Yeah? It was interesting. I was in New York last week giving a talk and talking about living in community. Yeah, and how when you live in community, your mind has to change because you have to think of what is beneficial for the entire community, not just what is good for me. Okay, you can't just think about yourself. You have to think about everybody in the community. It's the same in a marriage and a family. If you just think about yourself, your family life is going to be pretty miserable. You have to think about what's good for the group. So one man came up to me afterwards and he said, you know, this is the way we should think of as a society. Instead of voting for someone because this person will enact a policy where I get benefit, to vote for people that will enact policies that benefit the society, because when we live in a society where everybody is taken care of, then it's a more peaceful society and we ourselves are happier. And that's why His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, if you want to be selfish, be wisely selfish and take care of other people. Because if you take care of other people, you're going to live with happy people. If you have vengeance and punishment, in your mind, you're going to live in a society with a lot of unhappy people. And unhappy people aren't just going to sit there and twiddle their thumbs and say, fine. They're going to let you know they're unhappy. And there's going to be societal turbulence. And of course, that's painful for everybody. Okay? So I think we need to change our perspective somehow, to have a perspective. Here's the compassion part of the talk. Yeah, I just talked about the justice or lack of it part. But the compassionate part is if we change our attitude as individuals and as a society and think what is good for everybody and want the alleviation of suffering for everybody, then, we're going to enact policies that take care of more and more people, especially vulnerable people. And there was a beautiful quote in Brian's book. Let me find my glasses and I'll read it to you, because I think this kind of says a lot. Proximity has taught me some basic and humbling truths, including this vital lesson. Each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. Think about that. What would happen if you were judged on the worst thing you ever did? And that whenever you were introduced to new people, one of the parts of the introduction was, this is somebody who's done XXXX. The worst thing that you've ever done. Yeah, wouldn't be very happy. So each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. My work with the poor and the incarcerated has persuaded me that the opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. So, as I've said, I don't understand the word justice very well. How about the opposite of poverty is fair opportunity? Yeah? Fair opportunity for everybody. Finally, I've come to believe that the true measure of our commitment to justice, the character of our society, our commitment to the rule of law, fairness, and equality cannot be measured by how we treat the rich, the powerful, the privileged, and the respected amongst us. The true measure of our character is how we treat the poor, the disfavored, the accused, the incarcerated, and the condemned. So how we treat the most vulnerable people in our society. And I would like to add to this, people who are ill, who are injured, who don't have proper documents to stay in the country, that how we are seen as a society is measured in how we treat all these other people. Yeah. The rich, the famous, they can take care of themselves. They have their own set of problems. They don't need government give-outs, even though what a tax break is for the corporation is welfare for corporations. Did you ever think of it that way? The tax break for corporations is a government handout. It's government welfare to corporations. But government welfare to individuals so they can eat is another case. I find that very interesting. We are all implicated, Brian is saying, when we allow other people to be mistreated. An absence of compassion can corrupt the decency of a community, a state, a nation. Yeah, and I think this is something we really need to take to heart right now. What an absence of compassion does, what hate-mongering does. Okay? Fear and anger can make us vindictive and abusive, unjust and unfair, until we all suffer from the absence of mercy and we condemn ourselves as much as we victimize others. The closer we get to mass incarceration and extreme levels of punishment, which I think includes deportation for dreamers and other people, the more I believe it's necessary to recognize that we all need mercy. We all need justice. And perhaps we all need some measure of unmerited grace. And to put that into Buddhist language, I would say we all need compassion. Yeah? Compassion, from a Buddhist viewpoint, is the wish for someone, ourselves and or others, to be free of suffering and the causes of it. Yeah? What is wrong with compassion? Yeah, can you criticize compassion? Is something wrong with wanting the alleviation of suffering and the causes of suffering? Is something bad about that? You know, every single religion teaches compassion. People who are not religious also value compassion. Yeah? Isn't compassion a universal value that we all like, that we all hope other people will have towards us? And if we all want others to have compassion for us, isn't that something that we should show to other people as well? Okay? So compassion is the opposite of vindictiveness, anger, spite, belligerence, hatred. Okay? So compassion cannot exist in a mind that has any form of anger, hatred, revenge in it. You know, they can't. Well, one mind, we're contradictory people. We can have anger and we can also have compassion, but they can't exist at the same mind moment because they're completely opposite, you know, things. But when we cultivate anger and vindictiveness, do we feel happy? When we want to punish, when we threaten, are we happy? When we are jealous, when we want to deprive others of what they have, yeah, whether they earned it or not, just the raw emotion of jealousy inside of our mind, is that a pleasant emotion? Yeah. So, you know, if we check inside some of these emotions that are being encouraged in our national discourse now, yeah, are actually very unpleasant emotions to experience for any of us. Yeah. So we need to make a constant effort, I think, to monitor our exposure to the media and our exposure to tweets. I won't mention whose tweets, but if you wake up at 5 a.m. and you're angry and you tweet a hateful info to somebody, are you a happy person? Yeah? Think of that. You wake up at 5 a.m, your first emotion is anger and retaliation, and you express that immediately. Are you happy? Forget it. Yeah? So we need to really look at what causes happiness and what causes suffering, both for ourselves and for others, because all of our happiness and all of our suffering is interrelated, you know? As he was saying, he was saying we'll be evaluated as a society based on how we treat others. But we ourselves will feel either harmonious or disharmonious in our own hearts based on how we treat others. Okay? When we get angry, when we yell and we scream and we threaten, we may feel powerful because, we have this surge of adrenaline. But it's a false kind of power. And we're basically quite unhappy at that moment. Yeah? And then, of course, after we lash out at somebody or after we treat somebody else in an unfair way, then we're stuck with, look how I treated other people. Yeah, and we don't feel so good about ourselves. So I think, most people have problems with self-esteem. I think that problem with self-esteem is also related to how much anger we have and how we treat other people. Because when we treat other people poorly, we don't feel good about ourselves. Even if everybody around us tells us we were right for doing whatever we did to put somebody else in their place. Yeah. I don't know about you, but, because I'm very good at, when I'm mad at somebody, I can go around, talk to lots of other people to get them on my side. Yeah, do you do that? Yeah? Guess what so-and-so did to me? Look what they did to me. Da, 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 da. They're such a lousy person. They made me suffer so much. So come on my side, I need some help. We're all going to stand up to this guy. It's just like, yeah. And then I do something or, take my revenge in some way. And then sometimes we're even taught in our families to feel good when we got even. Yeah? Somebody threw sand at you, you threw sand back, good for you. You stuck up for yourself, for your rights. Yeah, now you have 2 crying kids in a sandbox. But that's now right. You got even, you stuck up for yourself. Actually, you know what my solution to the whole thing that's happening with Korea? I have a very good solution. Okay? My solution is we have a big sandbox. We put Trump and Kim Jong-un in the sandbox. Let them fight it out. And then they'll leave the rest of us in peace. Because I don't know about you, but I have nothing against anybody in Korea. I don't even know them. you know? And they're just trying to live and raise their families just like everybody here is. So I think we should just let the two of them, do their thing in a sandbox. Really, don't you think that would be better? Yeah? I mean, why do you need a whole bunch of codes for nuclear weapons when you can solve the problem in a sandbox? Just please leave the rest of us alone. Do you think anybody wants this whole thing that's going on? Yeah, you think anybody in Korea is happy about it? Do you think anybody here really relishes the idea? Yeah, especially those of us on the West Coast. Yeah, the people who are rattling the sabers live on the East Coast. Yeah, they have so much compassion for us on the West Coast. Yeah, who are closer to Korea. Especially our area, we have what is the Air Force? Yeah, Fairchild, yeah. Yeah, so what are the Koreans going to aim for? Really, sandbox, better idea. Okay? But what I'm getting at is, all of us are intertwined and interdependent. And if we inflict harm on others, it's going to come back on us. Yeah. Yeah. Because you can see it even in a family. You cause somebody else harm. You may convince them out of fear to do what you want. But are they going to cooperate with you? If you're a parent and you make your child afraid of you, does that mean your child respects you? We have to differentiate fear and respect. They're two different ball games. Making somebody afraid of you, it does not mean they respect you. In fact, most often they don't respect you. That's why they're afraid. If they respect you, they're going to be relaxed around you, and there's going to be some good communication. Okay? So how we treat others boomerangs upon us, yeah? And so it makes sense to be compassionate. Yeah. In Just Mercy, he also talks a lot about hope and how people need hope. Yeah? And how important hope is in life. And I actually wrote to him after I read the book, and I said, I understand hope, and that's very good. For me, I think we all need compassion, even more than hope. Yeah, because hope is a wish. Compassion is concrete. Yeah, hope is, may things turn out well. Compassion is, I'm going to act to make them turn out well. Yeah. Okay, so I think I've talked enough. What I'd like to do is open it and have some time for comments and questions and maybe answers, but answers are not guaranteed.
So you can raise your hand and I will bring you the microphone if you have a question or a comment.
This is your chance to ask. Many times people think, I won't ask the question in front of everybody else because it's a stupid question. And then after the talk's over, everybody lines up to ask their question. So please, with compassion, for me and for everybody else, ask your question now, because chances are if you have that question, somebody else in the audience has a similar question.
Hi, I'll start, and my neighbor here has a question as well. So you talked about the national discourse and
I have good friends and people I love on both sides. I even hate that I have to say sides. I'm not sure what that means half the time. I've seen disheartening, disappointing behavior, and I participated in disheartening and disappointing behavior myself on both sides. And so we talked a lot about like our society and our government and the word compassion. And when I think of parables and myths and stories and personal experiences that involve compassion, because I don't have faith in the national discourse, but I do have faith in compassion, being a recipient of it in my own life. But they all seem very personal in the parables, in the faiths, in the myths, in the stories, in my life, where it's not about like creating a law that makes sure that people are compassionate to me or anonymously giving like money towards something that I assume or hope will be somehow down the line compassionate towards someone else. So I guess my question is, can compassion, how do we, as a society, how do we use compassion on any level aside from you, me, right here? Or does that make sense?
Okay. So you're saying aside from just on a personal level,
Yeah.
having compassion, how as a society
Yeah.
can we have compassion?
What does that look like?
Okay. What it would look like is because society is nothing more than a collection of individuals. So if our minds change, then there's going to be systemic change. Okay? Because a lot of the injustice, happens on systemic levels. Where there's racism, where there's prejudice, where there's bigotry, that unless you're the victim of it, when you're in the majority population, you don't even notice that this stuff is going on because you don't experience it. But the people who aren't being treated equally to others do experience it. But I think, yes, laws are good and we need legislation for that, but to make legislation effective and to help the society want systemic, change, then as individuals we need to change our mind. Okay, so that all entails that we all work on ourselves, because it's so easy to point to other people and say, "You're so angry towards me, please develop compassion." And you should have heard this wonderful talk I heard, at NIC the other night about compassion. You should have been there. Because you really need to develop compassion. But me? Oh, I'm a good person already. So we often have a hard time really assessing our own level of compassion. And I think this is where we can do a lot. And yes, that changes it on a personal level, but when a group of people act with compassion, it starts happening on a bigger and bigger levels. So you can change this systemic racism or bigotry or genderism or whatever it is in your company if you get a certain number of people behind that who really want to change it. Is that making some sense to you? Yeah?
Yes, yes, yes. I'm Barbara. I've talked to a lot of people about our political stance. One of the things I remember hearing from a foreigner one time was that, oh, we love the American people, we just don't like your government. Which I thought was pretty astute.
Yes.
Recently I was with some people who were incredibly angry at people who litter in national parks.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible anger toward these people. And does that help? Every time they picked up something off the ground and put it in their own pocket to clean it up, their anger festered. Every time I hear people who do not like Trump talk about Trump, that anger and that hatred festers and gets worse. I guess my question is, and you said, the answer is compassion, and the answer is a group effort of compassion. Can you give me a picture of what that would look like toward Donald Trump? I finally decided that every time I had bad feelings about anyone, I pray for them.
Yeah.
And I see Donald Trump as a helpless little infant.
Yep.
And that helps me.
Yep.
It helps my mind
Mm-hmm.
stop festering the hatred.
Right.
But can you give us a picture of what we could do right now to help Donald Trump? Or what would that look like?
What would
it look like?
Yeah. I think all of us generating compassion towards him, seeing how much he is imprisoned by his own mind. Yeah, I mean, this person has so little mental space to cultivate compassion or to cultivate love. Yeah, and for us to have that cultivate that feeling towards him, because he suffers a lot, even though he thinks he's on top of the world because he has wealth and power and so on. But, thinking we're on top of the world because we have societal success and being happy individuals are two different ball games. Yeah. And so sometimes you have to look at those people and see their suffering and have that suffering invoke compassion. One thing that I do, to bring compassion for Trump into my life is at the Abbey, 2 times a week we do a certain chanting practice where we bow and we imagine all the Buddhas in front of us, and as we bow with a feeling of respect towards their magnificent qualities, we do so with humility, and wanting to purify our own mistaken actions. And we imagine that light, the light of compassion, the light of wisdom, come from the Buddhas into us as we're bowing, as we're chanting. So when I do this, I usually have the whole U.S. Congress, plus Trump, and the cabinet all around me, and I imagine we're all bowing to the Buddhas together. Yeah? And it's hysterical the first time you do it. You imagine, him down on the ground like this, in front of the Buddhas. But then you think, wow, wouldn't that help him if he were able to do that? And so I have Mitch McConnell and I have Paul Ryan, and I have these people here, and we are all Jeff Sessions, we Pruitt, all these people. We're all bowing to the Buddhas together, and because when we bow, there is the thing of humbling ourselves and admitting that we don't know everything. Yeah, that we are limited human beings doing our best, and we need compassion, and we also need, when we're bowing, we're expressing our wish to change and our wish to develop compassion ourselves towards others. So I find that kind of visualization quite effective. Now you might say, well, that's just a visualization. How's that going to affect him? But I think when our mind is very powerful, yeah, and when we have thoughts of compassion and send them out into the universe, I think it has some effect. Because we all know what it's like to be in a room full of angry people, what the vibe with anger is. Well, compassion creates a vibe too. Yeah? So we can be part of that vibe. I know I haven't heard the word vibe in Buddhism either, but we all know what I mean. Yeah. I don't know how to translate vibe into Tibetan, but we all know what I'm talking about. Okay, does that help some? Yeah?
It's validating.
Huh?
It's a validation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I've actually asked that question, and somebody's asked that question in all of the sessions that we've done in a different form. There's so much unhappy stuff and so much negative stuff in politics. And I remember one answer that you gave, which was so helpful to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, every time that somebody does something wrong, like when someone joins a terrorist group even, they're doing it with the intention of finding happiness. They think it's going to help them stop suffering. And I know that. I teach world religions, but I never thought of it that way before, and it really helped me a lot.
Yeah.
To see that their actions were for them what they thought would bring them happiness.
Yeah. I mean, that's what all of us do. Yeah. The worst thing we ever did in our life was motivated by a wish to be happy and not suffer. And yet it created the exact opposite effect from what we wanted. Okay? But all we're trying to do is be happy and not suffer. And our government thinks that killing people will bring happiness. Yeah? Or that abolishing the Clean Air Act will be happiness, or any number of things. But we can't just talk about the government, we have to talk about ourselves. And sometimes, what about road rage? When you get mad at somebody on the road, you think, giving that person the finger is going to make me happy. Yeah? Does that really make you happy? Yeah? Does stepping on the gas pedal and surging ahead and cutting them off, does that really make you happy? Are you laughing because the answer is yes? Okay. Yeah, there's a question here, Laura. Oh, sorry. Okay.
I'll try to make my comments anyway. I think I assume a simple question of, before we can have compassion for others, do you think we really need to have compassion for ourselves?
Yes. Well, I think we cultivate them at the same time, compassion for others and compassion for ourselves. And I think both compassion for self and others are based on self-acceptance and acceptance of others. Yeah? So really, in order to have compassion, we have to drop our unreasonable expectations that people should be, do, or think other than their being, doing, or thinking. And then to have a sense of empathy for it, understanding, and then, of course, compassion. But I think developing the two at the same time can go well. Yeah, I think they go hand in hand. But we definitely need some compassion for ourselves. But we have to understand what self-compassion is. Self-compassion is not going to the mall and buying yourself a present. Okay? Many people, when they feel unhappy, they say, I'm going to treat myself and go buy myself a present. So you go buy something that you can't afford that puts you in more credit card debt, and you call that happiness. I call that insanity. Yeah? So we have to understand really what self-compassion means. It doesn't mean self-indulgence. Yeah. Self-compassion means practicing the antidotes to anger. Yeah. Self-compassion means transforming our mind into compassion for other living beings. Okay? Because we're all related. It's not like, oh, first I have compassion for myself and I'll let you suffer. No, we do it all together. We're in this together. Okay. You had a question?
Yes.
Wait, there you go.
I spent 18 months in Vietnam a long time ago. And we had a saying, definition of justice is nobody here, just us.
Mm.
And I'm wondering, after all these years, practicing forgiveness and compassion is very difficult
Mm-hmm.
when you find out your government's lied to you.
Yep.
So my question is, it's a violation and a spiritual wound as well. My question would be, is man inherently evil? And can we overcome this urge to have war? Mm-hmm. Or is that side of us there that we can salvage?
Mm. I don't think we're inherently evil, and I think we can overcome the wish to have war. Yeah. And doing this takes a lot of individual work on our own side. It doesn't happen through legislation. Yeah? It happens through each of us working on ourselves and realizing that we cannot control everything, and that even if we could, it wouldn't make us happy. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of the, and put it this way, in Buddhism, we say that our problems are rooted in ignorance and in clinging attachment and in anger in all of its forms. Yeah? And so if we can eliminate those three, then we're going to be in really good shape. It takes a lot of study and reflection and meditation to do that. But as much as we practice that and go in that direction, that much we reap the benefit of it. Because the only thing we can ever change, actually, is what's happening in here. Yeah? So Shantideva, one of the 8th century Indian pandits, wrote this fantastic book called Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or that's one translation of the title. But he said regarding anger that we can either try and pick up all the thorns off the face of the earth, or we can put on a pair of shoes. Yeah. Modern update, we can either try to remove all the glass shards, rusty nails, and so forth, or we can asphalt the earth. Actually, both of those are not such good things. Let's stick with putting on a pair of shoes. Okay? So the idea is we can spend our whole life trying to change everybody else. But can we change everybody else? No. The only one we can influence other people, but the only one we can ever really change is this one. If we can change this one, then no matter who we're with, we can make our mind peaceful. But as long as what's in here is untamed, we will always have somebody to hate. Not because there's all these hate-worthy people outside, but because when we have the seed of anger inside, we will find somebody to be angry at. All they need to do is say good morning to us, and we'll get angry at them. Yeah? And it's true, isn't it? Don't you sometimes you wake up in a bad mood with what I call free-floating anger, and the person you live with says good morning, but they don't say it as in the way that pleases you, and you get mad? Yeah? It doesn't take much to make us mad. Yeah? But, we can't change all these people. I have a little slogan: sentient beings do what sentient beings do. Yeah. Sentient beings are beings with minds who are not Buddhas. So sentient beings do not act like Buddhas. Why do I expect them to do everything perfectly? And by the way, the definition of perfect is that they do what I want them to do when I want them to do it. That happens to be the definition of perfect. Yeah. So perfect is not that they do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. It's when they takes delight in giving, So and that mind frees us from stinginess, miserliness, and so on. So this is something that we try and practice in our personal lives and also in how we run the Abbey. Yeah, with a spirit of generosity. So we don't charge for things, for example. And then ethical conduct is I have the hiccups, is the attitude of nonviolence, of non-harmfulness. So really cultivating within ourselves the wish not to harm anybody, physically, verbally, or even in the way we think. Yeah, so it's an important value that we hold. And all of these are things that we are training our minds in, because the Buddha gave us many techniques for transforming our mind, many things to contemplate to help us retrain our mind so that we think in a way that is conducive to happiness. So we practice these methods. The third one is fortitude, which is an attitude of inner strength that can endure suffering or endure criticism. So it means cultivating a feeling inside of ourselves so that we don't flip out every time things don't go the way we want. Yeah? And that sure makes our life a lot happier, as well as the lives of people around us. The fourth one is joyous effort. So that's a mind that takes delight in virtue. Takes delight in doing things that bring happiness to the world. The fifth one is mental stability or concentration. And so that's it's training the mind so that we can concentrate and focus the mind on what is virtuous instead of letting our mind just go all over the place into all sorts of negative mental habits. And then the fourth is wisdom. So it's a mind, sixth, thank you. Sixth is wisdom. And so that is a mind that can discriminate and discern how things are. So it knows how things function, especially how our actions bring results in the long term. And it also knows the ultimate nature of existence. Yeah, so those are 6 things that we really emphasize in our life and in our spiritual practice at the Abbey. Maybe let's make this the last question.
Okay, this will be the last question.
Hi. So this kind of question goes to like the younger people, and like I myself, I'm 19, and we've been driven to go to like get our BA in business or something, and get family, be in relationship, go to work, and retire, and that seems to be the motto right now. A lot of us are in relationships and going to college, and I'll be going to U of I and stuff. So, but you said that suffering is formed by like ignorance and aversion and attachment. But currently in this society, we have the next iPhone, so that brings attachment. Then we have relationships, brings out anger and ignorance. And should I just the question is, should I just pack my bags and like go move to India and just like go full on like study Buddhism? Is that more I don't know, like more rewarding? Yeah, more rewarding to truly become release all suffering? Or because in society right now, like it's kind of harder.
That's a good question.
Good question. Very sincerely asked question. Yeah. I think it depends on the individual. Yeah. And it sometimes takes us a while to really look inside and see where our passion lies. What our talents are, what our abilities are, what really excites us, what we feel is very meaningful and purposeful in life. Sometimes that takes us a while to find. But it's important that we give ourselves the time and space to open towards that, instead of taking on society or our family's pre-programmed plan for how we should live our life. Okay? When I was in college, I dated somebody who had his whole life planned out, and he was going to, go to college and then go to med school and then get married and then live here and then do that and have, 2.5 children. And, I don't know what happened to the other 0.5 of a kid, but, he was doing everything that his parents want, everything that society, make $1 million, and then at the end, I said, and then? And then he said, then I die. And so that death puts to us the question of, what do we consider meaningful in our life? Because at the time we die, what is it that we have done that we're going to feel good about having done? And what have we done that we don't feel good about having done? Or what have we done that we don't feel good about, but we made peace with it and we learned from it so that now we are better people? So I think these are the kind of questions we need to ask ourselves, about what is really important in life. Because your iPhone, you can have 50 iPhones. None of them come with you when you die. I don't care how many they put in the coffin with you. None of them are going to come with you to the next life. Whatever obituary they write, whatever is on your Facebook page after you die, you won't be eating breakfast anymore, so you can't put that on your Facebook page. But, somebody will write an obituary and put it on there. That doesn't come with you. Everybody could be praising you and, swooning because you died, but you're already somewhere else. and none of that benefits you. So it's important to think about that, like what really is important, in our lives. And here is where I think those 6 far-reaching practices that I just mentioned are very important. I never heard of anybody dying with regret because they didn't work more overtime. Yeah? But what do people, what makes us feel good about ourselves? When we're generous, when we act ethically, when we have inner strength and we can control our temper and have compassion instead of wrath. When we take delight in virtue, where we can have some concentration and steer our mind in a good direction, and also, especially when we have wisdom. So if we can cultivate those qualities, then everything we do in life will be coming from a good space inside, and we will feel good about ourselves. We will create goodness in the world, and when we die, there will be a sense of peace without regret. Whereas if we live our life just always thinking me, I, my, and mine, and how can I benefit, and how can I get the best deal for myself, and how can I try and be what I think other people think I should be, and just succumbing to societal pressure, family pressure, peer pressure, whatever, then, you may live your life exactly according to the playbook, but do you have any joy in your life? Do you feel like you've contributed something to the benefit of the world? So I think this is something important to think about, and to have some courage to live from our heart, really doing what is important and making a contribution in whatever way we can. Does that make sense to you? So it takes actually a lot of inner courage to do that, because we face so much societal pressure of what we should do, what we should have, what we should be. So, okay, one more question. I'm a softie.
Can you tell us why you chose that? Why did you choose the life of Buddhism?
Okay, so why did I choose this life? A few reasons. One is I had always wondered as a young person, why am I alive? And what's the meaning of my life? And especially given that I'm going to die, then what's the meaning of the whole thing? And I didn't find much meaning in living the kind of life that my parents wanted me to live. It just wasn't interesting to me. And when I encountered Buddhism, and the teachers talk so much about the importance of our motivation and having a good motivation. So not about looking good in front of other people, but having a good heart and a kind motivation. And I thought, wow, that makes a lot of sense to me. That is worthwhile, because if you do that, then you're never a hypocrite. Because you're always trying to, do something with a good motivation. So I'm the same generation as this gentleman. Grew up during the Vietnam War, so I was tired of hypocrisy. And also, so that was one thing. And it gave me a way, Buddhism made sense logically, and it gave me a way to really work with my mind. Because I had always heard as a kid, be kind to others, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. And I saw a lot of people say that, but I didn't see anybody who did it. Yeah, and I didn't know how to do it because there were so many stupid people out there. How could I be kind to them? They're so dumb, I mean, they vote for this war and they do this and they're bigots and But so when I discovered Buddhism and it taught me a way to really look at my mind and to change those kind of negative and disturbing attitudes and emotions, I thought I want to do this. Yeah. Because I don't really want to die being the kind of person I am today. That was however many years ago. I want to use my life to transform myself and, to make some kind of contribution. And I also saw another factor in it is I saw how hypocritical I was, because I hated. You talked about the government lying. I hated when politicians lied, but when I lied, there was a good reason for it, And, their lies were damaging. My lies weren't damaging. I was lying out of compassion, for somebody's benefit. So, I had to start being honest with myself. And I saw, look, I have a long way to go. I got to start. Okay. Okay, let's sit quietly for a minute. I call this digestion. Yeah, so we had a rich evening of sharing. Take a minute or two and just think about what you heard so you can remember some of the things and take them home with you and use them in your life. So it'll just be a couple of minutes. And then let's rejoice that we spent the evening doing something really useful with our minds. And let's rejoice at what we shared together and at the merit or goodness or good energy that we created as individuals and as a group. So just rejoice in it. Let your mind feel happy about this. Yeah, more creation of goodness in the world through what we did this evening. And then let's imagine all that goodness as like a light in the center of our chest and let it radiate out to all the living beings around us. So sharing our merit, our goodness in the form of light radiating out, touching all the living beings. Yeah, so bring in everybody in the government or everybody you have personal problems with. Share this goodness with them and imagine that it makes their mind peaceful and tranquil. Okay. So thank you all very much. You're all welcome to come visit us at the Abbey. It's not very far away. And I also want to, wait, don't applaud. I also want to thank the Coeur d'Alene Dharma Friends and thank Laura Templeman for organizing this event because many people put in a lot of time and a lot of hard work to make this happen. So I want to thank them and let's all of us dedicate especially for them too.